The number of Ukrainian clashes with Wagner mercenaries in and around Bakhmut has decreased over the past few days. Russia's Wagner group began surrendering its positions to regular Russian troops this week after asserting full control of Bakhmut, after the war's longest and bloodiest fighting. Ukraine's defense leadership said its troops controlled a row of buildings and fortifications in the southwestern section of Bakhmut, but they were counterattacking on the town side in an attempt to encircle Russian troops inside the city. Recent weeks have seen Ukraine's military stepping up shaping operations. Attacks on Russian targets like fuel depots and weapons dumps far behind front lines, which typically precede a major advance by ground forces. But government officials in Kiev have been at pains to say the start of any counteroffensive would not be announced. In a statement on Telegram, a Ukrainian offensive is taking place in several directions, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Malia told, heightening speculation that a major push by Kiev to recapture land held by Russia's occupying forces could be getting underway. In dramatic footage, Ukrainian armed forces destroy a modern Russian T-90M tank during frontline combat near Donetsk. Tanks were crossing the street in the middle of a destroyed city and were shot, then blown up by an anti-tank missile. The footage was edited from footage recorded by the cameras on the tank itself, as well as footage taken by the unmanned aerial vehicle. The Telegram channel, Donbass Operative, published the relevant video, and it became clear that it was made by Russian soldiers. The armed forces of Ukraine eliminated about 211,150 Russian troops in Ukraine from February 24, 2022, to today, including 800 Russian soldiers in the past day alone. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine announced that on its Facebook page, according to Ukrinform. Yesterday, the Ukrainian defenders destroyed 12 enemy tanks, 20 armored combat vehicles, 36 artillery systems. The fighting in this stage of war between Russia and Ukraine has shifted toward an exchange of long-range artillery and missile strikes. But despite javelins being a shorter-range weapon, its maximum range is about 2.5 miles. Ukraine soldiers still consider javelins an effective way to inflict punishing damage on Russian troops. For years, as Ukraine was locked in a simmering conflict with Russian-led separatist forces in eastern Ukraine, Javelin anti-tank missiles were the premier military aid from the US, a defensive, lethal weapon intended to deter greater hostilities. Then, they were kept away from the front line and never used outside of training environments, but already, Javelin had become part of the lexicon in Ukraine as a symbol of Western support. After Russian tanks actually crossed the border on February 24, and some were immediately wiped out with javelins, the cult around the weapons grew. The tanks the Russians are using now are older, Ukraine soldiers said on the front line, because javelins and similar weapons have depleted their arsenal. Before the Russian invasion, some Ukrainian service members had attended special sessions with US trainers on how to use the javelin. But it was nowhere near enough to defend against Russian tank convoys once the war started. Using javelins and other anti-tank missiles now requires more of a hunt. The Ukrainian brigade uses drones to look for targets. Then small teams, usually about 2 people, move into firing range to take it out with javelins, which are considered lighter and easier to use, but reserved for shorter distances. The javelin is a fire-and-forget weapon. As soon as its operator takes the shot, they are able to run for cover while the missile finds its way to the target. This was particularly important in the early days of the war as the Russians tended to stay in columns when trying to enter urban areas. A javelin operator could fire from a building or behind a tree and be gone before the Russians could fire back. The Javelin is also good at targeting the weak spot of the Russian tanks, their horizontal surfaces, because its trajectory after launch sees it curve upwards and then fall on the target from above. When Russian President Vladimir Putin sent his forces into Ukraine a year ago, most observers expected a quick victory for the invaders. Those early predictions of Russian success have not materialized, for what experts cite as a variety of factors, including higher morale and superior military tactics on the Ukrainian side, but also, crucially, the supply of Western armaments. Commander of the Ground Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Colonel General Alexander Syrsky showed how Ukrainian soldiers destroyed Russian positions during an assault in the Bakhmut sector. He wrote that of the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade destroyed the Russians during the assault on enemy positions in the Bakhmut direction. Syrsky emphasized that the defense forces are working. "We continue to move forward," he said. As reported by Ukrinform, Syrsky said that the situation in the eastern sector is getting more complicated, but there is an advance of the defense forces of Ukraine in some areas of the front. Besides, Ukrainian forces have advanced around Bakhmut, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar has said, describing the eastern city as the epicenter of hostilities. She did not say whether a long-awaited counter-offensive had begun. Separately, Russia's military said it had repelled a new attack in the eastern Donetsk region on Monday. Bakhmut has for months been at the heart of fierce fighting. It has little strategic value but is important symbolically both for Kiev and Moscow. In a post on social media, Maliar said that, despite stiff resistance and the enemy's attempts to hold their positions, our military units advanced in several directions during the fighting. She said in Orikovo-Vasilivka and Paraskoviivka, Ukrainian troops gained from 200 m to 600 m, while in Ivanivsky and Klishchivka they advanced between 100 m and 700 m. All 4 villages are located within several kilometers of Bakhmut. The battle for the city in the Donetsk region has been the longest and bloodiest of the war.